stories. This is a place where old tales are told softly, where the world slows down, and where sleep comes gently. I'm here to share stories from Korea. Folktales passed down through generations, told the way they were meant to be heard. By candlelight, in hushed voices, beneath a quiet moon. So settle in, let the day fall away, and let me tell you a story. What does it mean to be kind in a world that doesn't always see you? Tonight's tale is about a girl whose heart remained gentle, even when the world grew harsh around her. She was given impossible tasks. She was treated with cruelty by those who should have loved her. And yet, kindness found a way to save her. This is a story about patience and magic, about how goodness can transform into lotus blossoms, and how truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to the surface. Some call this story Korea's Cinderella, but it is older than that, quieter than that, and it carries its own particular wisdom. It's called Kongjui and Patjui. But before we begin, let's take a moment to settle. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears, just a little lower. Feel your body growing heavy, sinking softly into rest. There's nothing you need to do right now, nothing to solve, nothing to chase. Your breath will guide you, slow, steady, peaceful. Tonight, you are safe. Tonight, you can simply listen and drift. And now, the story begins. Long ago, in a village tucked between green mountains and quiet streams, there lived a girl named Kongjui. Her name meant bean girl, and like a small bean planted in good soil, she had grown up gentle and kind. When Kongjui was very young, her mother passed away. It was just her and her father then, two quiet souls sharing a small house, learning to live with the empty space her mother left behind. Kongji's father worked hard. He loved his daughter. But a house needs warmth. A child needs a mother's care. And so one day, he decided to remarry. The new stepmother arrived with a daughter of her own, a girl named Patjui. Her name meant Red Bean Girl. Kongjui tried to be welcoming. She bowed deeply and spoke with respect. She wanted so much for this to be a new beginning, a family made whole again. But the stepmother's eyes were cold. From the very first day, she looked at Kongjui as if she were a burden, something to be used rather than loved. The stepmother adored Patjui. She dressed her in fine clothes, gave her the softest rice, let her sleep late into the morning. But for Kongjui, there was only work. Every day before dawn, the stepmother would wake her. She made Kongjui fetch water from the well, scrub floors until her hands were raw, wash clothes in the icy stream until they were white as snow. The stepmother's voice was always sharp, always demanding. She told Kongjui the stone field wasn't weeded well enough. She made her wash the rags again and again until they gleamed. Kongjui obeyed everything. Her heart was too kind to refuse, too hopeful that one day, if she tried hard enough, her stepmother might soften. But kindness was met with more cruelty, and late at night, when the house was finally quiet, Kongjui would press her face into her thin blanket and cry tears she had held back all day long. Still, she woke each morning and tried again. One day, the stepmother and Patjui began preparing for something special. They painted their faces with rouge, arranged their hair with jade pins, dressed in their finest silk. The stepmother announced that the new magistrate was holding a great feast, and she and Patjui would be attending. Kongjui looked up from her work, her heart lifting with a small, fragile hope. She asked softly if she might come too. The stepmother's eyes turned sharp and cold. Her voice became a blade. She told Kongjui that she could come, but only after she finished 3 tasks. First, she must fill the large water jar to the brim. Second, she must hull 9 sacks of rice spread across the mats. Third, she must weave 9 bolts of fabric. Only then, the stepmother said with a cruel smile, could Kongjui join them. Patjui laughed. They both knew these tasks were impossible. And then they left, their silk robes rustling, their voices fading down the road. Kongjui stood alone in the empty yard. She rolled up her sleeves and began to work. She carried bucket after bucket from the well, her arms aching, her breath coming hard. She poured the water into the great stone jar. But no matter how much she poured, the water level never rose. Confused, she looked closer and discovered a large crack in the bottom. The water was draining away as fast as she could fill it. Kongjui sat down beside the jar and wept. And that's when a small voice spoke. A toad, wrinkled and patient, hopped toward her across the stones. The toad told her not to cry. He said he would plug the hole, and so he did, settling himself into the crack. And suddenly, the jar began to fill. Within moments, it was brimming. Kongjui thanked the toad with all her heart and moved on to the second task. 9 sacks of unhulled rice lay spread across the woven mats. She picked up the wooden pestle and began to pound the grain. But the pile never seemed to shrink. For every grain she hulled, 10 more appeared. Her arms grew weak. Her hope began to fade. And then, a sound like wind through leaves. A flock of sparrows descended from the sky. Hundreds of them, tiny and swift. They told her they would help, and they pecked and pecked, their small beaks working faster than any human hands, and within moments, every grain of rice was whole and clean. Kongjui bowed to the sparrows, tears of gratitude in her eyes. But now came the third task, the impossible one. 9 bolts of fabric, to be woven from thread she didn't have, on a loom she barely knew how to use. She sat before the loom and felt her heart break. There was no time. The feast would be over soon. She would never finish. And then a soft light filled the room. A beautiful woman appeared, dressed in robes that seemed woven from moonlight itself. She was a fairy, descended from the heavens. She told Kongjui to go to the feast. She would weave the cloth, and before Kongjui could even speak, the fairy handed her a gown of flowing silk and a pair of embroidered shoes, so delicate they seemed made of flower petals. Kongjui changed into the beautiful clothes and ran toward the magistrate's house, her heart pounding with hope and wonder. The magistrate's courtyard glowed with lantern light. Music drifted through the air, soft and lovely. People in fine clothes moved like graceful shadows beneath the trees. Kongjui stepped through the gates, and for a moment she forgot about her stepmother's cruelty. She forgot the impossible tasks. She forgot everything but the beauty of the night. And then she saw them, her stepmother and Patjui, seated near the center, laughing and eating. The stepmother looked up, and her face turned pale with shock. She demanded to know how Kongjui had gotten there. Her voice was loud, accusing. Patjui joined in, claiming that Kongjui must have stolen the beautiful clothes and shoes. They advanced on her, voices rising, drawing the attention of other guests. Kongjui felt all eyes turning toward her. Shame and fear washed over her like cold water. She couldn't bear it. She turned and ran. Through the courtyard, past the lanterns, out into the darkness beyond the gates. She ran so fast that she didn't notice when one of her delicate shoes slipped from her foot, left behind on the stone path. She ran all the way home, tears streaming down her face, and locked herself in her small room. Behind her, on the path, the little embroidered shoe lay gleaming in the moonlight. The next morning, the magistrate walked through his garden. He liked the quiet hours after a feast, when the guests were gone and the world felt still again. As he crossed the stone bridge over the stream, something caught his eye. A shoe, small and exquisitely made, resting beside the water. He picked it up. The embroidery was finer than anything he had ever seen. Tiny flowers and vines, stitched with threads of gold and silver, He wondered who could have left it behind. The magistrate decided he must find the owner. A shoe this beautiful could only belong to someone remarkable. And so he went from house to house, asking every young woman in the village to try on the shoe. But it fit no one. Some feet were too large, some too wide, some too narrow. Finally, he came to Kongji's house. The stepmother's eyes gleamed when she saw the magistrate at her door. She pushed Patjui forward eagerly, certain the shoe would fit her daughter. But Patjui's foot was too big. No matter how she forced it, the shoe would not go on. The magistrate asked if there was anyone else in the house. The stepmother hesitated, then said there was only a servant girl, not worth his time. But the magistrate insisted, and so Kongjui was brought forward, still in her plain work clothes, her hands rough from labor. She sat down quietly. The magistrate placed the shoe on her foot. It fit perfectly. And then, from her pocket, Kongjui drew out the matching shoe. She had kept it safe all this time. The magistrate looked at her face, really looked, and saw something he had never seen before. A gentleness, a quiet strength, a beauty that had nothing to do with silk or jade, but came from somewhere deeper. He knew in that moment that she was the one he had been searching for. He asked her to be his wife, and Kongjui, who had never imagined such kindness could exist, said yes. Kongjui became the magistrate's wife. She moved into his beautiful house, wore fine clothes, was treated with respect and care. For the first time in years, she felt safe. But in her old house, the stepmother's heart burned with jealousy. She had spent years crushing Kongji's spirit. And now Kongjui lived in comfort, while she remained poor. It was unbearable. She whispered to Patjui, and together they made a terrible plan. One day, they came to visit, carrying a pot of sweet red bean porridge. The stepmother called out in a voice like honey, saying she had brought Kongji's favorite food. She said she was sorry for how she had treated her. She wanted to make amends. Kongji's heart, always too kind, wanted to believe her. She opened the door, and that's when they grabbed her. Before she could scream, they dragged her to the lotus pond behind the house. They pulled her to the water's edge, and then, with one hard push, they threw her in. Kongjui sank beneath the surface, her silk robes pulling her down. The water closed over her head. The stepmother and Patjui watched until the ripples faded. Then the stepmother dressed Patjui in Kongji's clothes, painted her face, and told her to pretend to be the magistrate's wife. When the magistrate returned home that evening, something felt wrong. His wife's face looked different, swollen and strange. He asked what had happened. Patjui claimed she was ill, that her face had swollen from fever. The magistrate noticed her voice was different too, rough and harsh instead of gentle. Patjui said she had strained it from coughing. The magistrate frowned, but he had no reason to doubt her. He tried to believe what she said, but deep in his heart, something troubled him. Meanwhile, in the lotus pond, something miraculous was happening. From the place where Kongjui had sunk, a lotus flower began to grow. It rose through the dark water, up toward the light, and bloomed into the most beautiful flower the world had ever seen. Its petals were perfect. Its fragrance filled the air. And within it, Kongji's gentle spirit remained alive. The magistrate walked by the pond one morning and saw the extraordinary lotus. He had never seen one so beautiful. Its perfume seemed to call to him. He picked the flower carefully and brought it inside, placing it in a vase in his room. But a strange thing began to happen. Whenever Patjui entered the room, the lotus would stretch out its stem and pull at her hair. Terrified and angry, Patjui waited until the magistrate was gone. Then she snatched the lotus and threw it into the kitchen fire. The flames consumed the flower, and it became ash. But the next day, an old woman from the neighboring house came to borrow embers for her fire. She scooped some ash from the hearth, and hidden within it, she found a beautiful bead. It gleamed like moonlight. She took it home and placed it carefully in her dresser drawer. And that night, she heard a voice, soft and familiar, calling to her. The old woman opened the drawer, and there sat Kongjui, alive once more. Kongjui told the old woman everything about the stepmother's cruelty, the pond, Patjui's deception. The old woman rushed to bring the magistrate. When he arrived, the old woman served him a meal, but she gave him chopsticks that didn't match. One long, one short. The magistrate frowned and mentioned that the chopsticks were mismatched. And that's when Kongjui stepped out from the shadows. She spoke softly, asking him how he could notice that chopsticks were different, but not notice when his wife had been replaced. The magistrate stared at her and suddenly understood. This was his true wife. The woman in his house was an impostor. Everything became clear. The swollen face, the harsh voice, the strange behavior. He took Kongji's hand, and together they returned to his house. He summoned the stepmother and Patjui. He told them he knew what they had done. Their faces went pale. They tried to lie, but the truth was undeniable. The magistrate banished them both, sending them far away where they could never harm Kongjui again. And Kongjui who had endured so much, was finally truly free. Kongjui and the magistrate lived the rest of their days in peace. They had children, a house full of laughter and light. They grew old together, their hands always clasped, never taking for granted the miracle of finding each other. Kongjui never forgot the magic that had saved her. The toad, the sparrows, the fairy, the lotus. She never forgot that kindness calls to kindness, and that goodness, no matter how deeply buried, will always rise to the surface. Sometimes the world is cruel. Sometimes we are given impossible tasks. Sometimes we are pushed into dark water. But like a lotus growing from the mud, beauty can emerge from suffering. And truth, patient and persistent, always finds its way home. Rest well, sleep peacefully. Good night.